Welcome to SmithWeekly Discussions, an occasional program for our members of SmithWeekly Research. Please note this program is a private discussion and everything contained herein is for entertainment and educational purposes only. With that, we hope you're in a comfortable position, along with your favorite beverage, to enjoy the discussion. We remind our audience to examine our show notes attached to each of our shows to better understand how our program functions. Before we get into our discussion, we want to say thanks for questions coming from our audience of SmithWeekly, including Ryan S., Sean M., Edward S., and Nick W. On the program today is a returning guest. Mr. Craig Parry is back on the program. Craig is the chairman and CEO of Vizsla Copper. The company is focused on copper project advancement and new copper gold discoveries in British Columbia, Canada, with its core Woodjam project that has an existing historic copper resource. The company also has a number of other various stage projects, including Poplar, Copperview, and Red Gold. Vizsla Copper is listed on the Toronto Venture Exchange under the symbol VCU and also on the US OTC markets under the symbol VCUFF. Craig, welcome back to the podcast.
Hey, Andrew, great to be back with you.
Yeah, Craig, likewise. Good to chat and a pleasure to have you back on the program. And it's been actually quite a while since we have talked. And of course, it's been an eventful 8.5 months into the year here, 2024. Why don't we kick it off here with getting you to give us your brief take on the current market conditions for copper juniors and maybe the broader junior natural resource market and the things you're seeing out there, Craig.
Well, I'd preface this by saying now isn't the right time to start buying stocks. I think we're going to see a serious rally in the fall when people get behind their desks. I think for the first time, we've sort of been hoping for the past 2 or 3 years that this would happen. Everything's sort of pointing to a very, very serious bull market emerging. And of course, then, in the next couple of years, particularly for copper, we're going to see, much higher prices and the big macro theme of electrification of the planet start to really play out. So, I think investors have got a few short months to really get positioned. We've been doing that ourselves. We bought a lot of our own companies in recent times. We've done a couple of financings in Vizsla Copper, heavily supported ourselves. I've put over 1.5 million into Vizsla Copper in recent times, just to get positioned and get ready for the boom that's coming. And so no better time than right now to really sharpen your pencil and start to look at stories and where you're going to deploy your capital. If you've got capital left, that's a bit of a challenge because it has been a tricky market. It's still very, very choppy. You'd never ever think that the gold price keeps bumping up against all-time highs. Silver's hovering around $28 to $30. The copper prices, I think we're back at $4.12 today. It's starting to rise strongly again. The market conditions don't suggest or don't reflect what we're seeing out there. So, there's sort of latency there. There's an opportunity to get set. This window has been extended for whatever reason, and so there's great buying out there now. I think we're seeing some really bloody interesting things. The majors have all rallied strongly. You've started to see the mid tiers and developers really move up, particularly in precious metals. If you look at Skeena, which I'm the lead director of, we've gone from about $4.50 a share 8 months ago to around $10.30 today. Artemis, Stephen Dean's Blackwater project, that company's doubled in value. Caliber's doubled. Vizsla Silver's gone from $1.30 to $2.40 here today. So the mid-tier companies and the future producers and developers doing pretty well. But you haven't seen it trickle down to the juniors just yet. There have been a few anomalies and a few good names and a few good rallies. Things like Hercules, Copper, those guys have done well. But for the most part, we're still sort of trapped in at low value. So, and I don't think that will last too long. A good friend of mine, Bryce Roxburgh, who's built a number of very successful companies, he always tells me that it takes about 12 to 18 months before you see money trickle down from the deals that are done by the majors acquiring mid-tier companies into the junior sector. So, that's coming in the near future. You can sort of, if you're a baseball player, it's like having beach balls thrown at you. Very easy to see what's going to happen. And very easy to hit them out of the park. So now's the time to get set. Interestingly enough, the M&A side of things is really, really heating up, of course. And on Monday, we saw Goldfields bid for a Cisco Mining. That was at a 55% premium to their 10-day VWAP, I think it was, and 60% premium to their share price on the day. $2.1 billion deal. You're starting to see more of that. Skeena rallied $2 off the back of that, or about 27 or 8% off the back of that takeout, knowing that these gold majors with their dwindling production profiles and old projects need to get positioned in new projects. So I think we're about to see, this is the pointy end of the wedge that will be a big M&A drive over the coming couple of years. And you'll see a lot of those mid-tier producers gobbled up, and that money will circulate back into the junior space and future winners. So now's just a great time to get set. I think it's an extraordinary time. Vizsla Copper at 7 cents or as low as we've ever been. It's just we're in deep bargain territory. So it's a great opportunity for investors. Now's the time to get set.
Greg, good commentary on some various areas here, whether we're talking seniors, mid-tiers, developed cos, and some of the activity on M&A and also discovery success we've seen recently here. One of the other areas we have is, of course, the bigger broad market conditions out there and some of the fear out there in the broad market and how that can play a role into the junior capital markets. And of course, money can be sucked out pretty quickly as well, as you and I both know and we've seen in the past. But also that potentially there's some structural issues with the Canadian markets. There's certainly been some folks that have talked about that, but given where we are just with the big broad market backset, potential issues around the world with poor policy, poor planning, some other evil that prevails out there, what's your view on just kind of the impact of the big broad market, if there is any, in the short term, and then also, if you're seeing potential cracks in some of the Canadian capital markets?
Oh, look, I think we've seen a massive crack emerge a few years ago, and we're sort of climbing out the other side of that abyss in a way. The Canadian market, I think, firstly, Trudeau in Canada has scared off a lot of foreign investment. Foreign investment levels are back to where they were 30 or 40 years ago. It's a horrible situation. Of course, you've had poor metal prices, a downturn in mining and exploration stocks. So investment in the sector has dried up. Conversely, you've seen the Aussie market rise to prominence in the past few years, and more capital's being raised in the Australian market than the Canadian market these days. That won't last. We've observed this before, and I've been doing this for 25 years, and certainly that last boom, I think, the Aussie capital market wasn't as strong as Canada. Aussies have done very well. They've sort of ridden that lithium boom strongly, among other things. You've got superannuation funds down in Australia that invest in resource stocks. So you've seen a much more buoyant market down there and better access to capital out of Australia. That will change, as people start to make money out of these deals. Cisco being a good example, M&A picking up, metal prices picking up. Canada, Toronto and Vancouver are the conduit for US investors and particularly US funds when they decide to start to get set in the mining space. So I'm not too worried about that. We'll see that come back. There's been a lot made out of naked short selling and short selling here in the Canadian market. Yeah, we certainly, if you've got an illiquid small company that's being short sold, it creates very difficult trading conditions and financing conditions. I don't know whether that's overblown. I'd love to see that clamped down on, but not a major issue. The major issue has really been the fact that we haven't, as a sector, haven't been delivering for shareholders terribly well. And I think that'll change, as metal prices really move up strongly. We've seen gold hit all-time highs. We saw copper 3 or 4 months ago hit an all-time high, popped up above $5. Looks like it's headed back in that direction all the way to $20 or $30 a pound over the next 5 years, I think. You'll start to see serious funding flows back into the sector. So again, it's just another sign that you should be investing heavily in this sector now whilst we're still in the late stages of these doldrums.
Thank you for that. And definitely there has been a bunch of under delivery in the junior capital markets, as you well know, and we've seen a lot of this pop up, and it's it's been a long road for sure, Craig. And then, of course, staying solvent is always a challenge. And just one lesson for the audience is just to make sure that at no time do you not have cash. There's always a need for cash full time. So therefore, you should always keep a respectable balance. If you have too small of a balance, there's not enough torque on that small balance to do anything. So make the needle move, keep cash available, cash or cash equivalents if we're talking metals, if that's what you decide to hold, that makes some sense. I do. So appreciate the comments on that. What other thing, Craig, just with copper, and of course your understanding, you've been involved with, how do I say it, energy metals, if I can say that word collectively, whether we're talking copper, whether we're talking about your success in uranium, et cetera. You and I have probably seen this stage play for energy over the last 10 years or so, of course, while being involved in the natural resource sector in various capacities. Copper will continue to connect both good sources of energy, Craig, as well as the bad sources. So really copper is indifferent in that regard. And that's what's positive about copper is it's needed, whether it's good investment or bad investment. But what is quality of energy to you? And what in your mind are those quality of energy sources?
Good question. It's interesting to see how things are playing out here because, the thing that will drive copper to 20 or $30 a pound over the next few years, the demand profile, I think people smarter than me, the economists at the major trading houses like Glencore and Trafigura are saying that copper demand set to double over the next 15 years. And that demands a replication of grids, coincidentally. And I did something last night that I never ever thought I would do. And that's that I put in an order for a Cybertruck, an electric vehicle. I'm a bit of a rev head and love V8s and carbon burning cars. But so, if I'm starting to look at buying electric vehicles, then a lot of other people are too. So, but anyway, the point there being that you wonder where this demand for copper is going to come from. Of course, we've seen the rise of China and copper demand rise from about 2000 to 2000 and to today from about 13 million tonnes per annum to 24 or 5 million tonnes per annum. So a near doubling of demand, largely again driven by China's demand growth, the urbanisation of the Chinese population. Of course, now we're talking about the electrification of the planet. You need, I think they tell me that in your average city block here in Vancouver, can charge about 3 or 4 Teslas, but if you have the 40 houses on that block, there's no way that grid can keep up. So we're going to have to see replication of grids. I wonder, and we're starting to see governments get serious about that. They understand the mess that they've created by encouraging people's move to electric vehicles. But I think before that happens, you're starting to see some really interesting things. The surprise demand driver here in the past 6 months that really pushed that copper price up to all-time highs were these big data centers being built out in the US. And of course, those data centers are built by the major tech companies, Microsoft included. And I see Bill Gates, Microsoft are now, they're investing $10 billion to build their own solar farm to power just one of their data centers. These things use huge amounts of electricity and hence need huge amounts of copper. An anecdote there that I've heard is that if you search on ChatGPT on your phone or computer, that uses 10 times the electrical power that a simple Google search uses. So you can see what's driving that energy demand and why you need these data centers and why they use so much power. So it's the private enterprise companies like Microsoft that are driving this current phase of demand for copper. But once we progress towards everyone on the majority of the population moving to EVs, we're going to need to see governments replicating grids, repairing grids, and putting up new grids. So there's a lot of bullish things going on there. And then finally, a bit of a surprise. It's been long talked about that India will start to get its act together and really start to push power out to its entire populace. And that's starting to happen writ large now as well. So you've got these three demand drivers, EVs and demand for electric vehicles, data centers, and then India kicking in. So I think that's what's going to drive the copper price. And in terms of power, nuclear is the way to go, of course. We've talked about that for a long time. I think, again, going back to Bill Gates, he's a big advocate. Not that I'm a fan of Bill, but he's a big advocate of small modular reactors. I think that's starting to gather steam. There's private companies listed companies in the US that are looking at doing more in terms of nuclear power. It just makes so much sense. It's clean, carbon free, whether or not you believe that anthropogenic global warming is a major issue. Certainly, the demand is there. So I think that's the way to go. We can laugh about the irony of charging your electric vehicle in Los Angeles and the fact that the bulk of that power is coming out of coal burning power plants. Probably not the way to go. I don't mind so much, but carbon's actually a very, very good element for humanity and the atmosphere. But I don't want to get political. But anyway, so I think particularly SMRs, if you look at that Microsoft's plan for this $10 billion power facility, that's solar and a mixture of solar and a mixture of wind. I think that there are great inefficiencies in that side of things, although photovoltaics the technology's come a hell of a long way in recent years. So, there's some merit to that. And the great thing about photovoltaics, if you look at silver, of course, I'm heavily invested as chairman and major shareholder of Vizsla Silver, where we've got one of the world's great silver projects and districts, and we're building one of the world's biggest silver mines over the next few years. Silver demand is increasing dramatically, driven largely by the photovoltaic demand. So, I think a mixture of those things is always good. I suspect we'll see less and less. Although, I want to say I suspect we'll see less and less coal burning, but that's really not the case because China will continue to burn a heck of a lot of coal to produce their power. I think, when I was last in the coal business about 7 or 8 years ago, they were burning about 3 billion tons of coal a year, which is sort of just about equal to the rest of the world combined. And that's not going away anytime soon, of course. But, nuclear small modular reactors, I think that's really starting to gather steam now. So uranium's a great place to be as well. It doesn't matter what metal, really. We haven't done enough work as an industry on exploration and development and permitting of projects. There's no way we're going to keep up with the demand that's growing here at the moment over the next 5 or 10 years. So I think we're about to go through the biggest boom the world's ever seen in mining and exploration stocks.
Greg, thank you for all of that. Some good points there. Congratulations on your EV. I will continue to run diesel powered and internal combustion engine. And of course, Toyota Land Cruiser style suits me. But certainly you can see some of that, some of those adjustments. And I agree with you. Happy to contribute CO2 and carbon in this world because those things are critically important to life. And people have to keep the perspective. And I can align with you as well. Not a fan of Mr. Gates, but there is money being deployed in some areas that are agreeable. We should see some more sense come into figuring of quality of energy into policy and then also into proper business. And that, things like wind and solar, while they do have select applications, that's granted, generally on an industrial scale, commercial scale, these things do not work. There's so many impacts, whether it's land footprint, wildlife, leach on solar panels into the water, onto the ground, and just the pure usage of land. And you and I both know this. And at the same time, of course, do you want to supply materials into all this? Sure, absolutely, I would too. But so hopefully we're getting some more sense there. And as you said, people have been talking about getting rid of coal in the United States for decades. Yet coal still represents a substantial piece of the grid, and it's taken decades to even have a slight reduction. So I think that's where folks stand on coal. And then, of course, you look at China, and you're right. It's absolutely coal build out. It's to be probably record-breaking commercial reactor build out in China. I would say within 10 years, we should have China now with the record of construction, beating the U.S. record, and then also being the majority holder of reactors. So lots of things there. Any follow-up comments, or shall we get into Vizsla Copper?
No, look, I think you're right. It's the old where does milk come from? Kids say it comes from a milk carton, don't realise it comes from the cow. Well, it's pretty funny that consumers don't realise that the bulk of their power still comes from coal. And the irony of building out these renewable projects is that they need a coal-fired or gas-powered plant sitting behind it for when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine type of thing. So, there's deep irony there, but the good thing about all of this is it points to much higher metal prices.
Well, with that, why don't we move into Vizsla Copper? The company just mentioned recently on news that it found a priority exploration target at the Poplar project that it intends to test. Talk about that first.
Yeah, good stuff, Andrew. We bought Universal Copper in a all share transaction back in March this year. Extraordinary deal. I think when we see much higher copper prices, it will go down in history as one of the great bargains of all time. We paid $3 million for 2 billion pounds of copper in the ground, about 1 million tons of copper in the ground, a good grade in a great location in central British Columbia. Perfect place to build a mine. In fact, we're surrounded by a number of major mines in that region. You've got Mount Polly, Gibraltar, Huckleberry mines just to the south of us. It's a great location. We hit the ground running. I went out there, the team, we had 6 geologists out there 2 months ago, and I headed out to see what they'd found, and I was blown away. It's an interesting property, big area, hardly explored. Utah Copper discovered the Poplar porphyry copper deposit back in the 70s. Sat their drill rigs on that, drilled the heck out of that, although they haven't closed it off, as what we discovered. It's very much open to the east. Proved up £2 billion. Spent about $50 million in today's dollars drilling that deposit out, and then didn't do much else. There's hardly any other drill holes across the property. We went to the south of the property. There was a little bit of a hint. There's a prospect there called Copper Pond. We headed out there and we were absolutely astonished. The first thing we saw was, a lot of copper staining on the rocks down there, including some high grade stuff. Then, as we started marching around the ground, big area of, phyllic alteration, lots of, porphyry associated alteration. And then on the second day, we just stumbled across an outcropping porphyry copper. It's pretty rare in a geologist's life that they actually find an outcropping porphyry like that. So we were pretty thrilled with what we saw. We've now proven that up into a target. We're going to do some IP across it. We've got a great mag anomaly in the center of this big alteration zone. Sits on a very big prominent structure that trends through there. I think it's a barn burning exploration target. The chances of that turning into a porphyry copper deposit are very, very strong. So we love the look of that. Would like to get out and drill it this summer, but we're focused up at our Woodjam property at the moment, where we've been drilling there for 4 weeks now. We've probably got another month on that drill program to go. Getting some really exciting looking rocks coming out of the ground there as well. So that's the focus for us now. We'll leave that Poplar, new Copper Pond Poplar target to test at a later date, but we're really, really excited with what we bought there. And, the fact that we paid $3 million for 2 billion pounds of copper in the ground, an extraordinary deal. I was thrilled to get that away and get that project on the books.
Yeah, congratulations on that, Craig. And I think that will definitely play a large role in the company valuation driving both in what we see as a return to the juniors in the copper market and as the copper price increases, but then also company specific deliveries on drilling success as well that we should see there. So I'm excited to see when you guys decide to test that target with drills, later this year or sometime next year, depending, of course, on how things go at Woodjam and how market conditions are going into the fourth quarter here, which should have some interesting fireworks with some of the events that are set to take place. So a little bit of popcorn and pizza is probably on deck, and maybe some good cervezas, as they call them. And so we'll have hopefully some good things to look at as we get into the fourth quarter. With that, you talked about Woodjam briefly. There is a drill campaign ongoing there now as we talk. Talk about what is being tested on this program, what you guys identified as the targets here, what expectations you have, Craig, and then also, of course, when the market can expect to see some results from this program.
Yeah, so just to orientate people, the Woodjam property, we acquired that 20 months ago. We paid $11 million to acquire all of the stock in a company called Consolidated Woodjam that gave us the Woodjam project. Woodjam, very good location, again, central British Columbia, only 50 kilometres off the major highway. There's major roads running through the project. There's logging roads everywhere. There's grid power across the property. We're 50 kilometres to the east of the major regional centre of Williams Lake. And we're only 10 kilometres to the south of the big Mount Polly mine, which is owned by Imperial Metals and is back in production. We're about 45 kilometres to the southeast of the Gibraltar mine. It's an area where, for the $11 million we acquired, again, nearly 2 billion pounds of copper and nearly 1 million ounces of gold at about 0.45% copper equivalent, which is good grade in today's money. You know, the global mine grade of copper around the world is about 0.5% copper now, so we're nudging up against that. So very cheap acquisitions, great location. So really interesting. It's sort of the project's a little bit, you know, it's well known here in Canada, or particularly British Columbia, because it's had quite a bit of exploration over the years. Goldfield spent $30 million drilling out parts of 3 of the porphyry systems that have been discovered on the property. I've been doing porphyry exploration for 24 years now, and I've never seen a property quite like it, whereby, you know, the previous explorers have come up with 7 targets, of which 5 have turned into porphyry copper discoveries and deposits. I've never seen such a conversion rate of target to discovery as this on this property. When we got onto the property last year, we immediately did a mag survey, a more detailed mag survey of the property. We came up with 103 discrete anomalies and drill targets that have potential porphyry signatures. So far, and some of those, you know, about certainly north of 10 of them, are these classic donut-shaped anomalies that are typically associated with porphyry coppers. They're associated with the destruction of magnetite at the center of a porphyry, and we've got a bunch of those there. So we've tested only one of those so far, and immediately made a discovery, our megaton discovery. Looks like we've drilled into the edge of a porphyry system, so we've got more work to do there. So that conversion rate of target to discovery remains phenomenal. This program, you know, so for investors, the important thing here is that you're getting exposure to a huge amount of copper and gold for not much money. I think our market cap today is about 12 or 13 million dollars, so it's an extraordinary bargain. Won't be this way for long. You know, I've got a reputation of taking companies from, you know, this stage to the hundreds of millions, if not billions. If you look at NextGen, that's a $5 billion company now. ISO Energy, now a $1 billion company. Skeen is now a $1 billion company as well. So we're on that trajectory. We're firmly on that trajectory, and I can see in my mind's eye that Vizsla Copper will be the next one we do that on. Hence, this is my major focus today. Apart from the fact that I love copper, I love what we're doing here at Vizsla Copper. We have, so on that existing resource base, none of these deposits have been closed off. There's been a lot of drilling. We noticed that before this drill program, we did a bunch of ZTEM, and then we've done IP lines over part of the properties, some of these targets. And you know, that whilst we've got this low grade 2 billion pounds at about 0.45% copper equivalent and 1 million ounces of gold, there's high grade zones within that. And that's one of the sort of untold things about these British Columbian porphyry systems, is that they often have sizable high grade zones, but people in the past haven't focused on those. So we're trying to understand those a bit better. And I'm very pleased to report that at our Deerhorn and Megabuck system, we drilled some holes to the south of Deerhorn. We're just waiting on the assays now, but I'm pleased to say that we were worried that the system was closed off to the south-southwest, and what we've found with these first couple of holes is that the system remains wide open. We've got some really juicy rocks that have come out of the ground, so I'm excited to get those into the lab and see what the assays hold for us, but I suspect there's some good things ahead there. And that will hopefully grow that resource base. We've got a resource base on Deerhorn of 33 million tonnes at 0.7% copper. We think that if we can get somewhere between 50 and 70 million tonnes at those sorts of grades, we'll have a mining project, and we'll start advancing that project into development studies and development over the next 5 years. So that's what we're looking at there. We're looking to try and understand those higher grade zones, grow the higher grade resource base, and go from there. That leaves us with all of these other porphyry systems that we've got. We're drilling at a prospect called Three Firs for the first time. Again, seeing some really interesting rocks come out of the ground. We've drilled a couple of holes on our southeast porphyry, That's almost certainly going to ensure that we have some good results there. And then we're going to drill some holes up at our Red Gold prospect. Red Gold, that's only 10 kilometres away from that Mount Polly mine and the Mount Polly pit. Very good indications of mineralisation on the ground up there, so we're excited to get in and test some targets up there. So lots going on. We should have assays out around Beaver Creek. That really kicks off the sort of back to work program for everyone, the Beaver Creek Conference, which is around I think the 9th of September. So look out for news then. And then we'll have a slew of results over the next couple of months after that as we finish the drill program and as those assays come in. So, when you invest in this sector, you want to be investing in companies that are doing stuff, working, drilling, and putting out results, and that's certainly the case for us. And we should be doing that in a rising market. I think when people get back behind their desk, I see the copper price is up solidly today. We're at 412. The price is up about 20 cents in the past week. I think when everyone's back behind their desk, we'll start to see markets rally again, metal prices rally, and exploration and mining stocks rally off the back of that. And we'll be putting out plenty of news flow into that rising market. So it's a good time to get set in Vizsla Copper while we're down in the doldrums here.
Just for the audience, this company is one that you're the CEO of, and it's not often that you take the CEO role. Often you're doing, more, I suppose, passive positions. But for the audience, this is something that you're going to continue to lead as CEO. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. This is all of my time now. I'm on the board of, and held fairly seriously there at Vizsla Silver and Skeena to some extent, but this is my major focus. I'm passionate about copper and really want to build a mid-tier copper producer in the shortest of time frames. These projects give us that opportunity to some extent. We'll continue. There's still, this market has been awful for a lot of people, so there's still a few bargains out there. So we continue to look at M&A. I think where the price is right and the opportunity is good enough, we may do some things on that front. But at the moment, we've got a huge resource base on the books, so we'll focus on the existing projects and particularly those higher grade zones on the Woodjam property and look to grow those.
Craig, and with Woodjam here coming out of this drill campaign, obviously we'll see results come here in due course, but how do you look at Woodjam here going forward as far as your guys' work to progress towards a first economic study, probably a PEA or something like this? But when do you see that would be in the cards to move that forward towards that development advancement? And do you see Woodjam as that core project that would probably be hit first before you guys focus on some of these other projects? Of course, notwithstanding that there's a major discovery on one of the other projects.
Yeah, that's right. So look, at this stage, so there's a few things there. So we've got this very large lower grade resource, moderate grade 0.45% copper. And we know, there's a few things interesting happening in British Columbia. You've seen the majors come in a big way. BHP, Teck are investing in juniors and exploration again. And then recently, the big news is to the west of us, Fortescue have come in and staked. Our property's massive. We've got 90,000 hectares there. Fortescue have come in and staked 300,000 hectares just to the west of us. It's property that's about 250 kilometres north-south to 40 kilometres east-west. Massive, massive area. And we think they're looking for that sort of, billions of tonnes of 0.4% material with a similar view to us that the copper price is going to be much, much higher very soon. So look, we'll look at that opportunity. We may end up farming some of the area out of some of the property because I think, there's a very strong likelihood that there will be billions of tonnes of that type of material in our property based on what we've seen so far. And in the meantime, we'll look at these higher grade zones and the opportunities to build those. We've done some internal, I can't talk too much about this, but we've done some internal scoping level work on those three key porphyries that we have on Woodjam. That's the southeast porphyry, Deerhorn and Megabuck. With those higher grade zones at Deerhorn and Megabuck, which are close to the surface, that potentially gives us an opportunity to develop two smaller scale pits on that whilst we do the pre-strip on southeast. So we're looking at all of that at the moment, and we've engaged external consultants to start the earlier stages of, moving from internal scoping study to more robust studies on that opportunity. And I think, that will be a mine. There's a lot of metal there at good grade across those three projects. It'll be a mine at some point in the future. Certainly, if this drill program and future drill programs continue the way they're going and expand those high grade zones, well, that will be a great outcome, and will really help the chances of becoming a mine in the nearer term. So that's the focus for us. One of the other things that we have done, the Poplar acquisition, we'll certainly be doing more exploration work down there because we see huge potential. But if you go back to what we did with ISO Energy when we bought those properties out of NextGen and started ISO, we did that in 2016. I sat there and sort of we bought 4 sort of real postage stamp size properties off Lee and the NextGen team where I was a founder and on the board of. And then from 2016 to 2019, we went about acquiring and staking a bunch of ground in the Athabasca Basin when no one else was interested. And we went from having 4 postage stamp sized properties to the third biggest land position in the Athabasca Basin. And then before I left the company, we started selling those the lower priority properties off to other companies so that the company had an opportunity to become at least self-sustaining in terms of capital. So by selling these things off to raising capital, raising finance through those sales. We've done that a little bit, and that's part of the strategy here, buying unloved projects for not much money. And Poplar, for example, there's so many great targets. The Poplar system itself, that porphyry deposit, that will have real interest to someone, one of the majors or other mid-tier companies as the metal price starts to rise. So, it gives us an opportunity to, we've got multiple projects, the opportunity to sell some of those off and have a better chance of becoming self-sustaining in terms of capital by selling those projects for shares and cash to other companies. So we're really deploying a pretty, a strategy here that's tried and true for us to advance the company.
Greg, thank you for that. With some of the, the entrants coming into the region and some of the development stage companies that are out there within British Columbia, when you look at some of the peer companies and you look at so far the M&A activity that's happened in British Columbia, how do you look at this now as far as what you think makes an attractive target for a major or mid-tier to buy out a company such as Vizsla Copper? What do you think works as far as scale and a production profile for a major or mid-tier to look hard at an M&A transaction of taking out a junior?
It's a really good question. We got control of a company called Vizsla Copper back in 2020. And Surge is a sort of good example, a proxy for what we're doing here. Surge had a little bit like this. We had a couple of porphyries discovered already on the property that had been drilled out to some extent, and then we went about acquiring Centerra's Berg and Berget projects. Since that time, we've seen, Christian Cargill-Samad, my mate, is the chairman there. They've brought in African Rainbow Minerals, of all people, for a $3 million investment and a right to continue their investment in that company. There's a few unique drivers there. I guess African Rainbow wants to get to some extent reduce its exposure to South Africa. But you're starting to see some really interesting things where, they've put out a study on that project. It can do 100,000 tons of copper a year. I think you need to be up above that, 50 to 100,000 tons, to attract those sort of mid-tier producers. That's where we need to head, I think. And I think we've got the potential to do that on the porphyries and the deposits that have been discovered on the property so far. Beyond that, to attract BHP or the like, you need a bigger opportunity, 200,000-300,000 tons of copper type thing. And I think that's what Fortescue are looking for. These systems can be very big, moderate grade at 0.4, 0.45, 0.5% copper. That's what they need to see. I think they all believe it's there. You've seen major investments in the province by BHP, Teck, Freeport, African Rainbow, Boliden, Antofagasta, Fortescue, South 32, and then of course Barrick and Newmont have always been there and coming back in a bigger way as well. So they're all starting to circle and get really really warmed up to BC and the opportunity it presents. I think British Columbia, you know, in the hills behind me here, there's probably 40 billion tonnes at 0.45% copper in the ground. You know, whilst they've been uneconomical, modestly economic in the past 20 years, those things are about to become highly economic, and so you're going to see major investment. And I think British Columbia has the opportunity to become one of the world's great copper producers over the next 20 years, and I think we'll see that play out.
Yeah, it's always interesting to get your input on this because you know this area really well and what really would attract someone to do a buyout. Obviously, prior to production, if you guys decided to take it down that pathway and development beyond a few economic studies to increase that certainty level. But yeah, really appreciate that. And British Columbia certainly is a place that is well known for, copper, gold, and a pretty good jurisdiction overall for mining activities. And so that's, I think, been part of the big foundation for British Columbia, and the wealth of British Columbia is the extractive industry in that province. So appreciate the comments with that. On capital structure of Vizsla Copper, the company did complete an equity financing in June. Talk about the current capital structure as it stands today in terms of shares outstanding, how far you see that cash that you do have on hand get you down the road, and then, of course, management and board ownership at this point.
Yeah, so look, we've got 227 million shares out at the moment. Some well out of the money warrants. They're at sort of 17 cents, there's 86 million. So without options, there's about 310 million shares out at the moment, trading at 7 cents. So that sort of gives us a market cap. Maybe it's a little bit higher, probably 15 million today. We're still, you know, it's a micro cap. We're still deep in bargain territory, I think. We've got about 6 million in the bank. The budget for this drill program is just a little over 2 million. So we should finish this program with about 4 million in the bank. We're just working out what to do right now. As I say, the market continues to be choppy and not terribly supportive of further financings. My partners and I have really sort of stepped in and propped up the company over the past couple of financings. You know, it's sort of, if you're going to raise money, it helps for other investors if they're going to come in to see you investing substantially yourself. You know, I've put 1.5 million of capital, of my own capital, into the company so far, and I'll continue to write big checks for it. My partners similarly. Um, but you know, it's a tricky time. You've just got to be pretty judicious. Well, you always have to be judicious as to how you deploy your capital. And as I say, we are looking. You know, I'd love to get down and drill that Poplar target that we've come up with here in recent weeks. But you know, does the market support that? Certainly, the low-hanging fruit for us is to drill in and around that high-grade mineralisation at Woodjam, get some good results, and see how we go. But we don't want to blow our brains out. I really don't want to come back to the market and be financing this year again. And we've got the capital to get us through well into next year and another drill campaign. So, you know, we'll just conserve our cash for the time being. And when the market supports, finance and drill off the back of that.
Greg, and talk just a little bit. You mentioned there some of the checks you've been writing. Talk just a little bit about the management and board ownership at this point.
Yeah, so look, we're at about 20%. It's been a while since I've checked my shareholding, but no, I must be at 6 or 7% today. Typically, the last couple of financings we've covered. Certainly, we did a small $2 million financing a couple of months ago, of which we did half of that, my partners and I. This last financing we've done was, I think we did $1 million of hard and 4.3 million of flow through. We saw some bigger flow through funds come in on that. They're supportive guys that stick with us and have done well out of what we've done in the past 10 years. So that's helpful. But we continue, like, as long as we're there, the company will never go broke. We'll always have funds because we believe in what we're doing. We write big checks ourselves.
Excellent. No, it's good to know. And those are good numbers, by the way. Appreciate you sharing that with the audience and myself. Talk just a little bit, just beyond here, obviously the Inventa Capital Group. Talk just a little bit about maybe some of the other work that you are doing, Craig. Obviously, Vizsla Copper is your main focus, But Inventa Capital continues to come up with other ideas, and there's a few other companies out there. Just talk briefly about maybe some of the things that interest you outside here that is going on under the umbrella of Inventa, and just stuff for the audience to consider in addition to, of course, Vizsla Copper.
Yeah, good question. Look, we've really in recent times we did a heck of a lot of deals over the last 5 years, and I suppose in this business, particularly at the exploration stage, you've got to kiss a lot of frogs, as it were, to find out what works, what becomes a discovery, what doesn't. We've had a few companies there that, for whatever reason, haven't worked that well. So we're sort of reassessing some of those things. But what we're really doing is trimming the number of deals that we've got, getting it back to something manageable, and then really focusing where we see the greatest potential. And we see the greatest potential certainly at four of our key companies, and that is Vizsla Silver, where we've got, I think the Panuco Kapala district, our discoveries there have been nothing short of phenomenal. I think that will be a 1 billion ounce silver district over time. We're, well above 300 million ounces of silver already after only three serious years of drilling. And we put out a PEA on that about 6 weeks ago, and that was nothing short of extraordinary. We show that this project it has an NPV of US about 1.1 billion, capital costs of about 220 million to get that into production. So that's a 5 times NPV to capex ratio there of 5 times. It's been many, many years since I've seen a project that's had such an extraordinary NPV to capex ratio. It's a bit of a project that you would have seen these in the 50s and 60s type of thing. So it's an extraordinary project. It will be one of the world's great silver producers. It's all-in sustaining costs around $9 an ounce of silver, and it'll be a serious silver producer. I think our first 2 years are at about 20 million ounces of silver production per annum, which is just shy of 300,000 ounces of gold production. So we've got, I think, the world's, and a lot of bankers and analysts are telling this, that it's the best independent undeveloped silver asset on the face of the planet today. So, Mike Connett, my partner and the CEO of Vizsla Silver, Simon Smirlik, another partner and COO of Vizsla Silver, both those fellows are on the board of Vizsla Copper and heavily supportive of what we're doing as well, I should say. But those guys, any time they spend outside of building one of the world's great silver mines is a bit of a waste. So we've really trimmed things back. We're focused on Vizsla Silver, Vizsla Copper, which we've talked about, and then we've got a couple of earlier stage businesses. I brought with me my old ISO Energy team across to Inventa, and they started a business called COSA. That's our uranium play. Watch this space. COSA is a tremendous story. I think we've got the best uranium exploration team in the business today, headed up by Steve Blower, who's also Vizsla Copper's VP Exploration, but Steve's the chairman of COSA. Steve was my VP of Exploration at Hurricane. In fact, he worked for us at NextGen as well. And Steve's got an extraordinary track record. He's discovered 3 uranium deposits now. So COSA is an exciting one for us, our uranium business. We're all heavily invested in that, of course. And then lastly, we've got another business called Targa Exploration, which we started as a lithium business, but discovered a phenomenal gold anomaly out at our Opanaka property in Quebec. That anomaly has the scale of the gold in Till anomaly that led to the discovery of Eleanor. Zach Flood, who's starting to really build up a reputation as a tremendous explorer. He generated that project and has been working on that for us, him and his team. He's very excited about what he sees there. So Targa Exploration, worth owning that for. Personally, it's very, very cheap. Market cap sub $10 million. It has this tremendous gold anomaly, and if that turns into a major discovery, that will be worth hundreds of millions of dollars. So that's our best. COSA, and the ticker on COSA is COSA on the venture, and then Targa, the ticker there is TEX. They're our best chances of sort of 10 to 100 bagger type investment opportunities at the moment. So we love those, heavily investing in those. And in the meantime, we tend to we'll focus all of our energies on Vizsla Copper and Vizsla Silver.
And Vizsla Silver has been a tremendous success all the way through here. So appreciate the work there, and a good asset that's come up here. And as the silver market continues to run here, this will certainly get a lot larger. So appreciate the comments on that. And then the other ones as well. COSA we know well, very familiar with COSA at SmithWeekly. And I always encourage the audience to take a look at some of these other companies because they are under an umbrella of competent folks that have had a lot of past success. So appreciate the comments there. Just to finish up here on Vizsla here, and then we'll wrap up. Would you suspect in these market conditions, if they remain weak over, say, the next 6 to 8 months, you guys are actively looking at M&A transactions out there. Of course, I know you can't speak specifically, but would you expect another acquisition? Is that something that would probably be in the cards in the coming months?
Yeah, we're certainly looking, Andrew. We kicked the tires on over 400 projects around copper projects around the world in the last 4 or 5 years, and we've got a short list of things there that we'd like to do. Some of those are in BC. The window won't be open for much longer as metal prices start to roar back to life. So we've got a bit of a window there to execute on our strategy on the M&A front. So, we're a chance of doing something. We'll only do an acquisition like that if the price is right and if it makes sense and fits with the strategy. And we see a couple of those opportunities. So we're working on that in the background. But in the meantime, when we don't have to worry too much about that if we don't get hold of something else because we've got a fantastic suite of projects, particularly on that Woodjam property.
Absolutely. No, it's good to, you guys already have a pipeline and a core project. And if you guys can strike copper in this case with some of those valuations that you're able to do on the past transaction here, that's pretty impressive to be able to pull those off in the right places. Appreciate that, Craig, and sharing a little bit with us on that front and those initiatives. Well, let's leave it there for now. For potential investors who are listening in, the company has a market capitalization of about 13 million Canadian dollars today. Why should Vizsla Copper be considered within the institutional, family office, and retail investors portfolio at this stage?
Really very, very simple. The key points are that we have a large metal resource, 4 billion pounds of copper and over 1 million ounces of gold in the ground now. That will rise in value as the metal prices rise. And then we've got these high grade zones that we're targeting and drilling out as we go. And, we're actively drilling as we speak, results coming, good looking rocks coming out of the ground, lots of targets. So the chances of further high-grade drill results very, very strong, I think, and news flow coming over the next couple of months. And then lastly, into a rising market as the copper price and metal prices generally start to move up coming out of the summer doldrums. I think it's a great place to be. And lastly, I would say with M&A, the M&A cycle really starting to kick off. That presents many sort of opportunities for investors over the next couple of years, both in terms of takeout potential, but also funds flowing out of some of the companies that are being bought out back into the smaller companies and junior parts of the sector. And then lastly, key thing is you're backing a team with a track record of taking these sorts of companies from a few $1 million market caps all the way up into the billions. And, we're determined to do that again with this one.
Very good point there, Craig. And it's also at a position where it's at a good price as well. So appreciate that. Just remind the audience, Craig, how they can contact the company.
Yeah, absolutely. You can reach us at probably best just to email me. It's craig@inventacapital.ca. Inventa Capital is INVENTA capital.ca.
Thank you for that. Well, look, it's always a pleasure to talk, Craig. It's good to get your insights on everything. And of course, thank you for the update on Vizsla Copper. We look forward to seeing further progress at the company. And of course, you're welcome back anytime.
No, I really appreciate it, Andrew. It's always a great pleasure, mate.